Reduced consumer need
Administrations now
coordinate global with policies.
Since the 1960s, South Korean economic development has been spectacular. In the 1950s, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world, having been destroyed by the Korean War since 1950 to 1953. In terms of gross domestic product (GDP), South Korea is placed 15 because of its status as the Tiger of Asia. South Korea placed 9 in the world in terms of exports and ranked 11 in the world in terms of import. South Korean economic development has intensified since the late 1980s. Between 1962 and 1989, South Korea's GDP expanded by the average of 80% each year, growing from 2.7 billion in 1962 to 230 billion in 1989. This figure was 20 times that of North Korea and was similar to a middle-income European Union country. In 1997, South Korea's economic progress has long been hampered by faults such as high debt rates, substantial offshore borrowing, and unruly financial market at the time of the Asian financial crisis. In 1998, economic growth dropped to 6.6% before quickly recovering to 10.8% in 1999 and 9.2% in 2000. South Korea's economic development fell to 3.3% in 2001 due to a weak global economy and dropping export and the fear that financial and corporate. In 2005, South Korea surpassed the United States in high-speed internet connectivity, memory chip production, flat screen display manufacturing, and mobile phone manufacturing. South Korea also ranked first in shipbuilding, third in tire manufacturing, fourth in synthetic fiber production, fifth in power production, and sixth in steel production. Out of 179 nations, South Korea ranked 36th in joblessness and 19th in the ease of doing business, and 31st in the index of economic freedom in 2010. South Korea exports semiconductors, wireless telecommunication equipment, vehicles, computers, and variety of other goods. One of their most important export partners is China, United States of America, Japan, and Hong Kong. South Korea imports plastics, electronics and equipment, oil, steel, and organic compounds. China, Japan, United States, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Australia are South Korea's top import partners. South Korean economic success inextricably linked to the contributions of huge businesses known as chaebols, Samsung Electronics, POSCO, Finland Motor Company, KB Finance Group, and many others are among South Korea's top chaebol.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Nur Alia Tahira binti Cerani and my matric number is 2021893104. Next, I will explain about fiscal policy of South Korea. First of all, according to Adam Hayes 2022, fiscal policy refers to the applications of government spending and tax policies to influence macroeconomic conditions, in particular employment, inflation, and macroeconomic growth. Second, the Korean government applies principles of fiscal policy, which is spending in the budget. Second, types of fiscal policy of South Korea. The South Korean government will maintain its expansionary fiscal policy for 2022. It is to boost the economy in the first half by loading 63% of its huge annual budget of 608 trillion won, which is 509.8 billion, according to Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance at press briefing Seoul Government Complex 2021. The government also will give priority to helping the recovery of domestic demand by increasing tax. Furthermore, instrument of fiscal policy South Korea. South Korea fiscal expenditure. First is deficit. Total government expenditure, including the purchase of goods and services, investment and transfer payments such as social security and unemployment benefits. Fiscal spending in South Korea increased in 257,627 Korean won billion in April from 196,285 Korean won billion in March. The nation's current account recorded a deficit of 0.008 billion in April 2022, the first deficit in 2 years. The second one is unemployment rates. Unemployment rate stood at 2.8% in May 2022, a decay but still near historical low of 2.7% recorded in the previous 3 months. The last one is inflation rate. The inflation rate for consumer prices in South Korea rose 5.4% in May 2022 from a year ago. Higher oil prices and other commodities including service charge and utility bills. The second one is tax. In general, the discretionary fiscal policy and automatic fiscal policy can be used to control unemployment or inflationary problem. First is automatic fiscal policy. The personal income tax rate in South Korea is a tax collected from the public and levied on several types of income, including employment, pensions, benefits, and dividends. The top marginal tax rate for person in the state used by the government. The second one is discretionary fiscal policy. The government can change tax rate in response to circumstance. The administration wants to reduce the maximum corporation tax rate to 22% to help South Korean businesses struggling with inflationary pressure. The last one is the government plans to lower the tax on share transactions from 0.23% to 0.20%.
Hi, my name is Ahmad Ifai Kamal, and I will be presenting about the next economic policy, which is the monetary policy. The next economic policy is the monetary policy. So what it is? Monetary policy is a policy that uses a country's central bank to manage the supply of money as an instrument for attaining the goals of the general economic policy. The objective of South Korea monetary policy differs over time according to its economic situation. The Bank of Korea takes price stability as its most important objective. Each seeks to bring about the price stability by setting an inflation target in consultation with the government. Many argue that even though price stability is important, inflation is very inevitable. There is a general consensus that mildly positive inflation is more desirable than zero inflation, where deflation may occur. Next is South Korea monetary policy instrument. For a monetary policy to be operated, the central bank need to put its instrument into use. Currently, the Bank of Korea is exercising three different types of instrument, which are the open market operation, reserve requirement, and lending and deposit facilities. First off is the South Korea main monetary policy instrument, which are the open market operations. Open market operation is a tool where the central bank buys or sells government bonds to the open market. It's carry out what calls an overnight call rate. There are three ways the open market operations conducted, which are the securities transaction, which comes in two forms, which are the outright transaction and repurchase agreement, monetary stabilization bonds, and account. Secondly is the reserve requirement, aka the reserve ratio. It is a system whereby financial institutions are obliged to hold a certain ratio of their liability subject to the reserve requirements in their accounts with the central bank. Commercial banks and specialized banks are subjected to this reserve requirement. Financial institutions should maintain the required reserve in the Bank of Korea in the form of current deposits, but may store up to 35% of their reserve in form of vault cash. The table shown is the requirement ratio according to the deposit liability types, ranging from 0% to 7%. Lastly is the lending and deposit facility. This is a policy instrument via which it provides loans to or receive deposits from specific financial firms, which refer to the banking institution. Currently for deposits, Bank of Korea is operating the liquidity adjustment deposits, while for lending, there are four types of facilities that are run by the central bank. This table right here shows the purpose of each of these facilities.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Fatul Abin bin Abdul Rahman, and I'm from class B, and my metric number is 2021239992. So today I will explain to you the definition of the inflation. What is inflation? Inflation is the gradual loss of purchasing power in a particular currency. A quantitative calculation of the rate at which purchasing power declines can be seen in the growth in the average price level of the economy's basket of selected goods and services over time. Next is I will explain to you about the rate of the inflation in South Korea. As you can see the diagram that I already include in the slides, South Korean consumer price inflation 0.6% year-on-year in November 2020, following a 0.1% increase the previous month, while speculators projected a 0.9% profit. The graph depicts the changes in the South Korean fresh food sector from month to month till November 2020. For example, we can observe that the fresh food index fell 11.5% in comparison to the previous month and increased 3.1% in the comparison to the same month last year. In comparison to the same month last year, fresh fish price grew by 7.1%, while fresh vegetable prices increased by roughly 7.0% and fresh fruit prices increased by 25.1%. Other than that, there are three causes of inflation. First one is demand pull effect. Demand pull inflation occurs when an increase in the supply of capital and credit causes an economy's overall demand for the goods and services to benefit much more than the economy's output potential. This boosts demand and contributes to price rises, since greater consumer confidence leads to more spending, with more cash accessible to individuals, and this increased demand drives price higher. Next is cost push effect. So what are the meaning of the cost push effect? cost push effect in inflation is the result of rising input costs in the manufacturing process. Costs for all types of intermediate products rise when more capital and credit are funneled into product or other asset markets, especially if this allowed by a negative economic shock to the supply of important commodities, such as advances raise the cost of the completed product or service, resulting in the increased consumer pricing. So next is I will explain about the effect in inflation. So the first one is individual impacts of inflation can cause inflation to grow. In the face of inflation, the incentive to spend and invest tends to boost inflation, producing a potentially disastrous feedback cycle, where people and businesses spend more quickly in order to minimize their time while retaining their declining currency. The economy becomes flooded with cash that no one requires. Following that, according to the social section, there will be a consequence in the terms of reduced unemployment. There is some evidence that inflation can reduce unemployment. Wages are sticky, which implies they fluctuate slowly in response to economic developments. Furthermore, customers' buying power rises as wages rise, leading the economy to heat up and induce inflation. This model is known as cost push inflation at once. And last but not least, inflation, according to the economy, will promote economic growth at some time. In the undeveloped world, central banks would find it difficult to persuade inflation or development to healthy levels.
Hello everyone, my name is Nurusa Fasharah binti Muhammad Chailaini and my matrix number is 2021833842. So basically, in May 2022, the seasonally adjusted unemployment rate in South Korea was 2.8%, which is slightly higher yet still close to the historical low of 2.7% that recorded in the previous 3 months. As the job market holds well in the face of increasing inflation and interest rates. Other than that, South Korea was added 935,000 of jobs in May from 1 year earlier for the 15 consecutive months. Nevertheless, South Korea's low unemployment has helped to boost economic faith at a time when key staple prices are rapidly increasing. Inflation had reached 5.4% by last month and was marked as the highest level since 2008. Besides, the central bank also has warned that it will most likely stay within this range until July. Since the last summer, the Bank of Korea has lifted its benchmark rate for 5 times and has signaled further rate hikes to combat the inflation issues. Next, there are 3 methods to overcome the unemployment issues. In general, there are no issues with the unemployment factor, particularly the unemployment issue affected by the highly educated people that looking for job. However, the more education one obtains, the greater the salary somebody will earn immediately after fleeing joblessness. In terms of quarterly revenue, for instance, a person educated with a master's degree in that first post-unemployment position earns more than someone with less than a high school diploma. For instance, an engineer with many years of education is likely to earn a larger wage than a lower skilled employee. Next, gender bias is another method to overcoming the issue. Throughout its swift industrialization and development, South Korea made significant progress against gender fairness in education and employment chances. The gender gap has become insignificant in secondary education enrollment and progression rates. In addition, women are more visible than ever in elite professions such as doctors and lawyers. Indeed, the South Korean government intends to improve perceptions by declaring on February 2014 that the main goal for economic innovation is to enhance female employment from 54% to 62% by 2017. Ultimately, the final solution is temporary employment condition. In this case, individual donations to regional health insurance funds could perhaps protect temporary or non-regular employees. Besides, the temporary workplace has risen and been viewed positively as companies look to enhance flexibility and reduce production costs in the face of fierce competition and uncertainty in market growth. Undeniably, though we all realize employees may also provide minimal coaching to temporary employees unless they recognize they will then be leaving the company shortly. Conversely, employers in South Korea would be required to provide at least some basic training to those temporary employees as they necessitate orientation or beginning training to perform well on their career.
Hi, my name is Ren Zafira, anak perempuan Mama Isa. My matric number is 2021612282.
And I will present about implementation economy of South Korea. South Korea is a country that cares about economic stability of its country. South Korea is a well-developed mixed economy. South Korea education system as well as the creation of a motivated and educated citizenry are significantly responsible for the country's high-tech boom and economic success. Next, to fuel its economy, South Korea began to implement an export-oriented economic policy. But in this world, every country will face crises and economic problems. One of them is inflation and unemployment. As we know, inflation is an economic word that refers to a general increase in price and decrease in the buying power of money. Next, unemployment refers to a scenario in which a person actively seeks employment but is unable to obtain job. Next, all government and central bank use regulatory and monetary policy to try to keep inflation under control. Inflation is measured as a percentage. Korea has used inflation targeting as a monetary policy framework since 1998. Next, in order to ensure price stability, which is the core purpose of monetary policy, the Bank of Korea maintained a flexible inflation targeting framework. The current target for consumer price inflation is 2.0% year-on-year. Plus, the bank paid special attention to the impact of monetary policy on financial stability in order to ensure medium-term price stability. The framework to monetary policy implementation key feature is the Bank of the Korean employ an interest rate-oriented monetary policy on operation. Thus, the bank calculates its policy rate, the Bank of Korea base rate, and use policy tool to keep the overnight core rate closely matched with the policy rate. Next, we go into the unemployment section in South Korea. Unemployment is something that will happen in every country. In response to growing unemployment and widening economic inequality, the government main policy reaction has been a fast extension of unemployment benefit. The mainstay of the strategy has been an employment insurance scheme. Next, the mainstay of the strategy has been an employment insurance scheme. However, the government strategy has a number of flaws. To begin with, despite a series of increase, unemployment benefit continue to cover just a small proportion of the jobless. Next is Korea employment insurance system. The Korean EIS strive to minimize unemployment, increase employment, and vocational excellence, and provide financial and employment assistance to the unemployed. The Republic of Korea, EIS, Hereafter Korea, is organized into three key programs as employment stabilization, vocational competency development, and unemployment benefit. The Korean government promotes many active labor market policy. In the process of overcoming the 1998 Asian financial crisis, several ALMP were eventually proposed as EIS sub-program. The three core projects had around 20 specialized programs altogether at the time of the EIS exception, and three are now about 80 to 90 sub-programs targeting specific goals.
In conclusion, South Korea's economy is quite spectacular. Despite their economic ups and downs, they have maintained a high level of control to today. West Korea is capable of rapid economic development. Their fiscal situation helps the economy recover fast from any crisis. Monetary policy is responsible for regulating either the research requirements levied on extremely short-term borrowing of the central bank, reducing inflation or interest rates, and ensuring steady growth. When it comes to inflation, using the inflation targeting, which the target inflation rate is tracked annually to see changes in local and worldwide economics. Concerning unemployment, it is one of society major issue, and the government has proposed a few plans to address the issue. Although South Korea has achieved amazing achievement in combining rapid economic progress in 2022.